Hello, welcome to my channel, Save Infinity. So in this video, I just wanted to talk about, like infinity, if you will, and how not only are we infinite and eternal, souls or beings, and, reality itself with infinite timelines, if you will, but how even just the smallest little point, a little dot or speck is also infinite and, contains infinity, if you will, within it. Especially if you think about, zooming in on that little point, that little dot or speck. You can zoom right in till it's super huge, and you can keep zooming for infinity, eternally. You can just keep zooming and keep zooming. There can be no end to that zooming. You could zoom in so much on that tiny little dot, that tiny little point, to the extent that it becomes as large as the whole entire universe, if you will. It's never ending, the amount that you could keep zooming in and expanding that. The same sort of thing applies to everything within this universe. Everything truly is infinite in that aspect. There are no bounds or limitations in that aspect, which is really cool when you think about it. And in this sort of typical 3D, human-minded type reality we tend to find ourselves in, it's so easy to kind of, forget or not really be able to conceive or conceptualize the real grand nature of the infinite in that aspect, and just see things as very kind of, logical and black and white and very limited, if you will. And so, just that reminder to really try to, release those sort of 3D logical type ways of thinking about things and perceiving things, not closing yourself into that little box, when that box, truly doesn't exist in many aspects and is an illusion in itself. And when that box in itself, if you will, is infinite as well. There truly is infinite and unlimited potential and possibilities in every single moment. And we don't have to kind of attach to such a, 3D logical linear way of perceiving things and expecting things to unfold when, the past doesn't really exist anymore in a sense, other than our own memories and imagination and, ways of conceptualizing things, if you will. It's not like the past is literally just sitting there. And so it doesn't have to govern or dictate what happens next in your present moment, or what your future will become, or what way your pathway will go. Every single moment is infinite and unlimited potential, and can chop and change to any direction, if you will. Anything can happen at any moment. So the more we kind of release and untether from those sort of more, linear logical ways of thinking and expecting everything to just run straight on that track that, the past plus the present must define the future, etc. And instead kind of letting all that go, letting that sort of, those past ideas kind of just, poof, fade away, vanish away, and not be governing or dictating what we experience here in the now, or what we perceive or allow ourselves to, imagine or accept or conceive can possibly happen in the future as well. Sometimes it kind of feels like we're just, on a little train, on a little set train track, the past, the present, the future, and we're just moving along, and that's just is what it is. But really it's more like an ocean, right? Like an infinite ocean, and we're just plopped in the middle of it, and we can really swim anywhere. you know, heaven is all around us, as they say, tapping into that sort of infinite quantum holographic field, if you will, and kind of knowing we really can step into anything and experience anything, you know. And unlike thinking of with the train track that, you know, the track we're on was going that way, so the track we're continuing on is going that way. Instead, thinking of it more like the ocean in that aspect. Just because, you know, we came from that direction doesn't mean we have to keep swimming that direction. We can go over here, over there. Like, there is no limitations truly in that aspect, other than the limitations we place upon ourselves, or that our mind kind of conceives and places, you know, upon itself or upon ourselves. And so, you know, as tricky as it can be at times, just kind of trying to, you know, release and let go of attachments in that way of, you know, what things mean and what that, you know, means or determines for the present moment or the future. You know, kind of letting go of that sort of, you know, 3D logical linear way of thinking, and seeing it and, you know, thinking of it more like swimming in that ocean, or like life being more like a dream, if you will. And kind of, you know, really just kind of allowing yourself to let go in that way, and just kind of relax and surrender to it, and allow things to unfold in whatever sort of magical or miraculous way that, you know, it possibly can. You know, even bringing it more back down to fundamentals as well, like even other people or beings or what have you are infinite in nature as well themselves, you know, like infinite fractals with, you know, so many different things. So just because, you know, a person or a situation or experience may have, you know, shown this fractal or this part of itself to you, or, you know, you encountered or experienced that fractal, doesn't mean that that has to dictate or determine what that is, or who they are, or how you will continue to experience such a person or situation. You know, they are equally as infinite, and, you know, anything can happen. So if you kind of, you know, let go of those past happenstances and stay more in the present moment, in the now of being, you know, like a new birthed moment in every moment, where every moment is new and full of potential, where anything can happen regardless of past experiences. You're not holding on to stress or fear or worry, or, you know, even like resentment or anger or you know, assumed ideas or what have you, and really kind of allowing yourself to surrender to that flow in the now present moment, where anything can unfold and anything can, you know, rearrange, and a new fractal of its infinite self can, you know, beam through into your reality. You know, just because something was a no yesterday doesn't mean it can't be a yes today. Or just because something was a yes yesterday doesn't mean it can't be a no today, for example. And so instead of allowing that sort of, you know, illusionary external reality to kind of dictate and tell you what is or what will happen or what can occur or what's possible, you know, kind of releasing, you know, assumptions and what have you, and preconceived notions and judgments or what have you that we kind of can obtain and observe and assess from the external reality, kind of letting that go, and instead tapping more into that infinite eternal nature and unlimited possibilities of, you know, what can occur in each and any given moment, and instead focusing more on that of, you know, garnering that feeling and, you know, focusing your thoughts and imagination or beliefs or what have you on more of what you actually want to experience or what aligns for you, rather than allowing the external reality to decide that and place that upon you. Instead, kind of, you know, pushing out your own your own sort of pathway, if you will. And you don't even have to, you know, necessarily get down to all the nitty-gritty of exactly, you know, what you want to experience or what you believe or what you want to kind of, you know, manifest, if you will. And instead you can kind of just, you know, work on releasing those lower energies of, you know, stress, worry, fear, doubt, etc., etc. And instead just, you know, work on governing feelings of what you do want to experience, like peace or calm or happiness or joy or love, and kind of, you know, curating that within yourself, so then that, you know, kind of reflects and pulses out and attracts what fractal of the infinite nature of everything kind of, you know, pings back at you and shines through back at you. You know, if you kind of think of yourself as an infinite magnet, you know, and just because, you know, you're in one sort of state, you know, magnetically attracting, you know, a fractal of an infinite something towards you, doesn't mean that that's how it always has to be, or just because, you know, a certain fractal of an infinite something is, you know, kind of magnetically, you know, connected to you, doesn't mean that that's the way it has to stay. You can rearrange the magnet that you are, if you will, to then, you know, attract new fractals of the infinite nature surrounding us. So, you know, you are infinite in that aspect. You know, reality itself is infinite. And so, you know, just kind of remembering that in those ways, to not allow yourself to get attached or chained to or bogged down by certain sort of, you know, 3D linear conceived perceptions and ideals or what have you, and tapping more into that infinite nature and allowing that to express and manifest for you. All right, well, I might leave this one here for now, but sending you so much peace, love, light, and blessings as always. Bye.